Hello, welcome everybody to our class, our webinar on taking better photos of your products. I'm so excited to be here to share this with you. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen up here so we can just get right into the presentation. I also want to encourage everyone to take time to, if you have questions at all, please type those in the Q&A section. There's going to be some Q&A at the end of the webinar. So I want to make sure to have an opportunity to answer all of the questions that you might have as we're going through. I recognize that the webinar style doesn't leave it open for discussion as we're going through the topic. So as your questions pop up, just take time to go ahead and type those into the Q&A section in the panel. And we are here for a workshop on photography to take better photos of your work. In this webinar, we're going to share skills that are going to help you utilize your smartphone or the camera that you have and take better images of your work so you can save money on professional photography fees, which is a really hard statement for me to make, is seeing how I am a professional photographer. But I also, as an artist, understand the value in being able to save money where we can when we're just getting started and maybe don't have that budget to hire a professional photographer every time we have new things to share and to release into the world or to put on our website or on social media. I want to thank IDRS Acorn Project, nativebiz.org is their website, for creating this space for us to come here together online and share this knowledge and information with you. I've been teaching this for them for a couple of years now, and it has evolved quite a bit. I just did an update on this section. My name is Roxanne Best. I'm an enrolled member of the Federated Tribes of the Colville Reservation here in Washington State. You can read my mission statement or my purpose statement here, but I just want to also share that I've been a photographer since 2000. I've been a photographer a long time. I started out as an underwater photographer and videographer when I taught scuba diving in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And also I studied like the basics of photography in college, and that was where the passion started. And I became a wedding photographer and started to really, I attended culinary school, and that was where the passion for taking food photos really started to come to life as well. But truly my passion in photography is taking opportunities to to bring out the personality of my subject matter. I really love candid photos. Branding photo shoots are my specialty now. If I do take work, most of the time it's working with an individual who's working on creating a brand for themselves and need images so that they can use on social media or websites. This includes images of the artist or the person themselves, as well as the products that they are putting out into the world. And I like to do this because it's really easy to get stock images and utilize stock images, but then it doesn't have your personality or the energy that you put into your work in those images. So by doing branding photos and also learning how to do this on your own, which we're going to talk about, I don't hire right now a branding photographer. I do a lot of the things on my own using some simple equipment. I work with Native nonprofits to facilitate workshops, speak at their events. I also am a yoga instructor and I teach stand-up paddleboard yoga. I have a long list of things and skills and things that I do. I also coach those looking to start a business in writing their business plans and also creating marketing strategies for social media and developing their online presence. Today, it's day one of our time together. And during this time, I'm going to try to slow down because I want to make sure that I'm getting all the information I can to you throughout this process. So today we're going to cover the basics of photography, and these basics will apply to a DSLR camera, a digital single lens reflex camera, and it will also apply to your smartphones. And the concepts around the photography will apply across whatever device you're using to capture your images. And then I'm going to show you how to apply those basics to your smartphone. And I specifically use an iPhone, so I'll be sharing the screen on my iPhone when we get to that point so that you can see what that looks like. I also want to say that other smartphones out there, the Samsungs, the Google Pixels, there's so many. Those are the three main ones: the iPhone, the Google Pixel, and the Samsung line of phones. They all have basically the same applications for taking photos and video. And so it's just a matter of locating that application. When I say application, like when I show you how to adjust exposure or focus and things like that, the same stuff is available on your phone if you don't have an iPhone. It's just a matter of determining where that is. And then we're going to talk about setting the scene, like understanding what your subject matter is, and then preparing for your photo shoot. And then I'll give you a quick rundown of the day 2 agenda. And then the final slide has a contact page and how you can reach out and ask questions if you have questions. One of my favorite quotes, and I get asked all the time as a photographer, what's the best camera to get for photography? And in reality, the best camera is the one that you have with you. And that's a quote from Chase Jarvis. And he is a pretty famous photographer. He created an online platform for education for creatives. And it's real. I haven't been on the platform in a long time, but it's called creativelive.com, and they're based out of Seattle. And the reason why I love teaching this class is because of this statement and how applicable it is. The best camera is the camera that you have with you. So many of us get into the mindset that, oh man, I'm going to start taking professional images of my work. I need to go spend a few $1,000s or hundreds of dollars on a new camera, when in fact, most of us have in our back pockets or in our purses or in our hands a smartphone. And smartphone technology around photography and video has evolved so much so that you can almost exclusively do photos of your work with your smartphone. Now, keep in mind that it isn't taking photos and having those low quality images. It's taking photos and understanding how to create the best possible image with what you have in hand. And part of that is understanding how to create those beautiful images with your smartphone. You do lose a little bit of control by using your smartphone. There's a lot of automatic things that happen, but I'm going to show you a couple of apps that you can use. These apps are the things that you download onto your phone so that you can have that control of aperture, your f-stops, and your shutter speeds. So the basics of photography. So this is the part of the presentation that is really just giving you a foundational understanding of what photography is and how the image is affected by these different settings in our phones or on our cameras. Now, some of you might have a DSLR And this will be really applicable to you. I don't have images of like what those settings look like on your camera, but you can find your aperture. So this image on the right is the exposure triangle. And what this is all three of these elements are going to affect the outcome of your image. So as you're taking a photo, you could have your aperture set a certain way, and then you'll have to adjust your shutter speed and your ISO in order to accommodate that aperture. So the aperture is something that can be changed manually, and you can do it on your smartphone without a special app to download. This is also known as your f-stop or your f number. You can see in the exposure triangle, they have some examples of the f-stops that are used in photography. You have f32 all the way down to f1. And I just want to also point out that aperture is how open your lens is, and it can affect, and it does affect the end outcome of your image. So the next slide will demonstrate this, but aperture, the bigger the number, the smaller the aperture, the smaller the opening in the lens. The smaller the number, the bigger the opening. So just remember that with aperture, it's the opposite of what you might think. So an f32 is going to be a really small opening in your lens, whereas an f1 is going to be a really big opening. So an example is if you're shooting an image at f2.8, it's going to have a shallower depth of field. So only certain elements are going to be in focus, and then the rest of it is going to be blurry. And that's typically what people shoot for when they're taking doing portrait photography. So their subject matter is really nicely focused, and then the background is blurred out so that the focus is really on that individual. So going back to that aperture discussion, you can see it here demonstrated on the right-hand side where that f32 opening. So imagine that this is your lens on your camera, and this is what opens and closes with the release. And it's the same thing on our smartphones. So just imagine that if we were to use our eyes as the example, and we can all do this together. So if our eyes are wide open and we walk out into the bright sunlight, what's the first thing that we do? We squint our eyes. So that lets less light in. So it's the same thing with our lenses. So, and then the exact opposite, if we're going out from really, really bright sunlight, our eyes are squinty, our pupils are smaller, so less light is getting in. And then when we go into a dark room or into a space with less light, our pupils begin to open so that more light can get in, so we can interpret our surroundings. And depending on the health of our eyes, that transition may take a little bit longer than others, but it's the same idea with photography. So if we're outside on a bright sunny day photographing our work, we're going to need a really small f-stop, so that, which is a high number. So that would be f32. We're going to need the aperture to be really, really small, so not a lot of light gets through. Otherwise, the images will be really washed out. We've all probably seen those photos where we take it and it's like everything is washed out, super light, super white. You can't pull any details. So the aperture is something that can be changed manually. It allows light to pass through the lens into your camera body. If you're shooting with a digital camera, that's how much light is hitting the sensor, which is interpreting what's being reflected in. And this applies to smartphones as well as DSLRs. So the larger the aperture, the more light enters. The smaller, the larger the aperture, the more light enters the camera. the smaller the f-stop, so f1 would be like, or f2.8, which is the most common, that would be that lower depth of field. So like if we were shooting landscape photography, we would want to use like right around an f11 to that f32, because that gives us great depth of field. So we'll be able to see like from where we're standing all the way out into the distance, and the horizon will be in focus. So that's how f-stop or aperture can affect the outcome of our images. So I just wanted to pause for a moment in case anybody has questions around this that are ruminating, so you can find that Q&A button or type in the chat the questions that you might have. Okay, so a second side of our triangle is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is something on our smartphones that we have to have an application downloaded, like using a special app, which I'm going to show you those, in order to control these aspects. Now, you can do burst shutter speed, so it rapid fires on your smartphones. But when we're talking about the exposure triangle, you do need an app in order to control this aspect of it. This is the length of time that light falls on your camera sensor. The longer the shutter speed, the more light falls on your camera. The higher the shutter speed, the sharper your moving object will be. You'll want to use high shutter speeds for sports photography or action shots. So this gives a great illustration of shutter speed on the right-hand side. So a shutter speed of, so the 1/500, that's, the 1 is a second. So that means that 1, if you're a 1/1, that means your shutter opens for a second and closes. Now 1/500, that's 1/500th of a second. And so it's really, it's a pretty fast shutter speed. And then you can see it goes all the way down to 1/8, 1/4, or half. So if you have something moving, that shutter speed is going to be open for a little bit longer. So it's going to travel across the lens or across your focal point and get a little blurred. We've all seen those images of maybe cars on a racetrack or horses running by, where the background is still and in focus, but the car moving by or the horse running by is blurry. So that is how we can affect the shutter speed. And we've also seen images of horses running by where it's like they're frozen in time, in motion. Their motion is stopped. And that's like the stop action. And that's when you have the faster shutter speeds. And so that is the second side of the triangle. Again, I just want to take a little pause in case somebody has a question to post in the Q&A. Again, there like any questions that you ask, I promise are going to be valid. So please don't be shy about asking questions. Okay. I just saw in the chat that someone takes photos of flowers. Yes, that is so useful. While we're in the pause, just if everyone could just type in the chat where you're coming from today, and maybe what you would actually, where you're coming from, where you're at right now, and one thing you'd like to learn in this webinar. That would be super helpful. Okay. So the third side of our triangle is ISO. Back in the day when we shot with film cameras, we would go and buy ISO. And that was like the most, like one of the main things to think about. If we were taking photos outside in bright sunlight, we would say, I need ISO 100 or 200. If we were shooting inside where the light was really low and dark, I think 1600 and 3200 were the higher ends of film ISO before they jumped into digital photography. And one thing I want to point out with ISO is that the lower the ISO, the more detail you're going to get in the image. So that means that the film or the sensor on your digital camera is really sensitive to the light that's hitting it. Whereas the, it's less sensitive and you're able to pull more detail. Whereas as you get higher in the ISOs, the film gets, or the sensor gets more sensitive, but what's happening is it's pulling less detail. So in this guide, you can see ISO 50 all the way up to 25,600. And you can see like at the 25,600, there's like, it's kind of like, there's a lot of noise in the image is what it's called, where it gets really grainy and isn't really sharp. And you may have experienced this with even taking photos with your smartphone. If you're inside and it's dark and you don't have the flash on and you take that photo, you might notice it's really grainy and isn't really sharp. And that's because the camera in our phones automatically adjusts the ISO to accommodate for that low light situation. So shutter speed is the length of time that light falls on your camera sensor. The longer the shutter speed, the more light falls on your camera. The higher shutter speed, such as ISO 1/1000, the sharper your moving objects will be. You want to use a higher shutter speed for sports photography or action shots. Also, if you increase your ISO too high, this is going to reduce your color accuracy and its dynamic range. And I'll see if I can pull up some examples of what that looks like when you have too high. Like I've shot indoor events at like 3200 ISO and my aperture wide open because the light was so low and I couldn't use flash. So I had to sacrifice some of the dynamic range and the color accuracy in order to capture the images in that specific environment. So it depends on what you're doing and your purpose with your photography. So ISO is also another element with our smartphones that we would have to use an application, downloaded app on our phones to make the adjustment manually. Otherwise, our smartphones do it all on their own. They decide. We can set the exposure, but then our smartphones will say, okay, this is the exposure that they want. So we're going to adjust the shutter speed and the ISO so that they're getting a quality image. Which you can do the same thing with aperture priority or shutter speed priority on our DSLRs. So you could say, I want everything, like let's say you're shooting a sporting event or some powwow dancers, and you want to make sure that the action is stopped. And so the dancers aren't blurry. So you could shoot in shutter priority where you had a fast shutter speed. So then you're going to get the shooting at a shutter speed of 1/500 so that the dancers are really sharp and in focus. And then the camera is going to automatically adjust for the aperture, how wide open is it? And it's also going to automatically adjust your ISO. So those are some things that you can manually adjust in your DSLR cameras. And if you're shooting through an application on your smartphone, you can also make these adjustments as well. Again, I'm definitely gonna show that to you through my phone. So that is the conclusion of understanding the basics of photography. This is going to help you have more control over the outcome of your images. So hopefully you have a pretty good, I mean, that was a really quick overview of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And hopefully you understand how it will affect the outcome of your image and how together they form the exposure triangle. So whether you're just getting started as a photographer or you've been taking photos for a long time and maybe you're a professional photographer, it's really important to have an understanding of the basics, which is going to help you enhance your photography moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Q&A. I can share the slides for this presentation, if that will help. In regards to aperture settings, I have a DSLR and I usually have it set on auto. Should I change to manual settings and adjust when doing product photography? Do you usually take several photos to see if the aperture and other settings are working? Ruby, that's a great question. So in regards to aperture settings, like if you're shooting on auto mode, it's just like using your smartphone. The camera is making all the decisions for you. And what it's doing is the sensor is putting out all the sensors into the space. And on an average, it's going to figure out what your exposure, your aperture, your ISO, all those out, the triangle, what that's going to look like. So the camera isn't saying, oh, I know that Ruby wants this particular person in focus and exposed. And so we're going to make sure and do that. In manual mode, it doesn't do that. I'm sorry, in auto mode, it doesn't. But if you switch it to manual, then you can like look at your subject and say, okay, I know I want them to be, or that item to be in focus and exposed correctly, which means the light. So then you can make those adjustments manually. However, I do want to point out that if you are shooting in manual mode and you're doing an event where you're moving into various light situations, shooting in manual is a lot more work. I personally shoot manual mode just because I like to have that control. However, I have run into situations where I was shooting outside in bright light and then went inside and forgot to change the ISO back to the indoor, or one way or the other. And the photos were really like, they were not really they weren't the best. Fortunately, I reviewed the images really quick on my screen and then figured out what I was doing and then adjusted. And I do usually take several photos, especially when I'm doing product photography, to see if the aperture and other settings are working. Absolutely. I'll in a shoot where I'm using my DSLR, which tomorrow I'm going to demonstrate, which maybe I'll do both my smartphone and my DSLR. So you can just kind of get an idea of what that looks like from both perspectives. Because even if you have a DSLR, because I have one, I have a couple. And a lot of times, instead of like setting up my camera, doing all the lighting things, and like it's a lot more work to shoot with a DSLR than it is to use our smartphones, especially if we're taking images that are going to be used for social media, or if we're taking images that are going to be on a website. Oftentimes those can be a lower quality in regards to like your dots per inch and your resolution and the size of the files. So when I shoot camera raw with my DSLR, the file sizes are huge. And if I were to translate those huge files onto my website, when people go to my website, it'll take forever for those images to download. So having a smaller file size is often just automatically captured with the smartphone. Whereas with a DSLR, oftentimes you have to adjust that in post-processing. I hope that answers it for you, Ruby. And the beauty of using a digital photography instead of film is you get to, it's instant gratification. So you can look at what you just did and see like what the outcome is going to be, which is so much nicer. Like back in the film days, I'd have to like take rolls and roll. Like when I was doing underwater photography, and if I was doing film and not slide film, because on the boat we could develop slide film. I remember, I keep in mind, I was out in the middle of the ocean. And so I would take like 25 rolls of trying to get this perfect shark shot of the shark swimming in front of my camera and the light rays coming down. And I was shooting black and white film. And so I took like 15, 20 rolls of photos and shipped them off back to the mainland, had them developed, and only like 1 or 2 of them came out. But however, with digital, we can just look at the back of our camera, or we can immediately load it to our computers and get like an accurate color interpretation. And also the digital editing process is like so amazing compared to getting things processed with film. I would shoot RAW, and anytime you get an opportunity to shoot RAW or JPEG, and I'm glad you brought that up because I absolutely forgot to include that in this new flow. So shooting RAW versus JPEG, with the RAW file shooting in our camera, we get all the details, like all the information. If we shoot in JPEG, the camera does a little bit of its own processing inside. So again, it's gonna, because it wants to make a smaller file. Imagine imagine shooting RAW is like looking at a rainbow and you're getting all the color spectrum, but it's a bigger rainbow. As opposed to shooting JPEG is going to be like, okay, these tones between the red and orange, those can go. The tones between the blue and the, what RGB, I forgot what the spectrum is, but anyway, so the tones in between the colors that you would get in a RAW file, the JPEG is going to squish those out to make a smaller file. So if you can shoot both, you can do that. I've had different suggestions from different photographers saying shoot JPEG and RAW. But if your little card readers that are holding all those files, they're going to fill up a lot faster. Shooting RAW alone is going to fill up your card faster than JPEG alone. So again, the next part of our discussion is going to be determining our needs in a photo shoot and what to look for when we're preparing for our photo shoot. And this is a great thing to consider. If you know that you're going to go out and go on a hike and you're taking your camera and you only have a certain amount of space on your card, you might shoot JPEG so that you can take more images. And we'll get into a little bit of making sure that you have space on your device for your photo shoot, or maybe you bring a backup card that you can insert into your camera. I'm looking to see if I have any like right here in front of me, but I do not. So, and then like deleting photos off your smartphone so you have room if you're going to be out taking photos as well. I don't have Photoshop or any program like that to adjust any photos. So I'm going to show you some inexpensive ways that you can do some post-processing without using Photoshop or Lightroom. So shooting product photography, most likely you're going to be in a space where you can load photos onto a device if your memory card or your phone fills up. So I would say shoot RAW. And then on your DSLR, just switch it to RAW. I always shoot RAW when it's possible, because then I have options. I like to be able to have options about whether or not I want this color tone or this detail to be in the image. I don't want the camera to decide for me. I want to make that end decision. So any other questions on this section before we okay. Ready to learn it all. Photographing reflective glass. Okay, so that's a really common one. Reflective glass. There are some amazing YouTube videos out there about that, and it's like all about the filters. Every artist I've ever talked to or taught, we have a really like long discussion about capturing images of your work before, especially 2D work, before it goes behind glass, before it gets framed. Not only for the use of like putting it out on social media or putting it on your website, but taking, like, if you're a 2D artist, you're a painter, photographer, whatever, you want to, photography is different because it's digital, but you want to capture those images before it goes behind glass, because what if you decide, even if that work sells someday, you could potentially reproduce that work in prints or in other aspects. So if you have that really good image of that work before it's framed and put behind glass, it's going to be so helpful. Happy to learn it all. I'm just looking at the questions or like where y'all are coming from, and I'm not the best photographer. Okay, Amanda, we're gonna talk about that, because it's subjective about what makes a good photographer and what you're basing your judgment of yourself on. Lighting, product photography inside, perfect. We are going to talk about that tomorrow in more detail. Getting the right angles, we're going to talk about that. Small object photography, awesome. Close-ups for fine detail. Online shop, perfect. Inside and outside for DSLR. Ruby, I hope that little section about ISO and aperture settings, that the whole exposure triangle, I hope that helped you to understand the different settings for inside and outside. And then ring light or flash, so we're going to talk about lighting in more detail. Send a file, okay. Yes, social media content, Amelia, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm all about the social media content. Clothing design. To reduce photo size. Janine, I use Photoshop or Lightroom to reduce photo size, but there's ways that you can do it in your smartphone as well. And there you can, like, whatever app you're processing your images on, which we're going to talk more about applications tomorrow. You have no, okay, so if your product is glass and you have no choice, thank you for clarifying that, then there are definitely some it makes it a lot more complicated with reflectors, and like it also brings into the equation the things that are in the room around the reflective item. So I'm glad you clarified that, Karina, because I can give you a little bit more insight on that as well. And one more Q&A, what are the low-cost post-production apps? Kim, we're gonna talk more detail about apps tomorrow. And so Melody, should the picture be taken up close or from afar and then zoom in? So it depends on what you're trying to do and the quality of the image that you're capturing. Because sometimes we'll capture, if it's a low quality image and then we're trying to zoom in to get the detail will be pixelated and not sharp. So sometimes it's better to capture it as tight in and close as we can, and then zoom in even more to the detail. So depending on the quality of your camera, you may be able, like I've taken pictures of speakers pretty far away, and then been able to zoom in just on their face and get a really sharp, nice quality portrait for them. So it just depends on if it's important that you get the whole item and then you're then zooming in. So I would just say take 2 pictures full and then zoomed in. But it just depends on the quality of that image. Okay, perfect. So I just also want to share. So these are a couple, and this is where I'm going to do a little demonstration. I'm going to get seated so I can make sure that I've got myself connected. Okay, so like I mentioned before, if you're shooting with the DSLR, a digital single lens reflex is what that stands for. All that means is that your camera has lenses that can be removed and changed out. And I'll show you what those, like some of you have those types of cameras, but I'll also let you, when I do a live photo demonstration tomorrow, I'll show you my DSLR, the different lenses that I use when I'm doing product photography. And then also what it looks like taking photos with our smartphone, which is really the main takeaway here is understanding the basics of the photography, like the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And then, but also like how to control those using our smartphone. So the first thing that so I downloaded both of these apps. I haven't paid for either of them. Most of these both have paid options. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the presentation. Maybe. Okay, there we go. I'm going to stop my screen share. And then I'm going to share my phone with my phone screen with y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in there. And again, if you guys do have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. So we're going to go here, share. Okay. Can y'all see my phone? Oops, dang it. I apologize. I'm having some. I did a test run through right before we started, and and it worked. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So I'm guessing that everyone can see my phone screen now. And
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
can
gonna
see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So ignore the chaos. I do I do wrangle myself in at some points. So I am going to open up my first app, which is the Raw Plus. Actually, I'm going to rewind. I'm going to rewind and open up the camera. So I want to first let you guys in on a little secret. So I'm going to just use my finger to make my lens really dirty. And I'm just using my makeup to try to make it. So you can see, like, if I were to take a photo right now, it's a little bit hazy, and a lot of us have probably experienced this before, where we take a photo and we're like, why is it so blurry? I have this really expensive, nice phone, and my images are still blurry. 9 times out of 10, it's because our lenses are dirty. So if you have a lens cleaning cloth, use that to clean your lens. I'm gonna clean my lens. I should have done a before and after. So all I'm doing is wiping my lens, and you can see the difference. Look how much more detail is being pulled out of those patches as opposed to when the lens was dirty. So that's like step to getting better images of your work is making sure your lens is clean, especially on your smartphone. And okay, so the next thing I want to show is, you can see on my phone, there's 3 lines. Let me see if I can. So if you look, there's 2 lines going up and down and 2 lines going across. And these are just, if you are struggling with composition, like understanding where focal points are, this is a great guide for helping to understand the golden ratio, where, you know, the rule of thirds and all those things. So wherever the lines are crossing, that's going to be a focal point in the image. So that is where our eyes naturally go in an image. So if I were taking a picture of these guys, where that line is on the left hand side, I could just line it up and then take the photo. So the other thing I want to point out is, you can see the flower in the bottom left-hand corner is yellow. So if I don't want to use the macro lens, maybe I want to use, I just want to stay with the normal lens. You can see it's a little bit different. Sorry. So it just changed. I'm going to stay in the same position. There's with the macro. And there you can see how it also changes the position a little bit. So this is really individual. What do you like? What do you want? So the other thing to look at is, I've got it on, so the arrow at the very top where it's pointing down, I'm just going to tap on that with my finger, and you can see when I tap on it, when it's down, it opens up options on the bottom. So I could change the image ratio. Maybe I want to shoot square. Maybe I want to shoot more like a Instagram story or a TikTok, which is the 16:9 ratio, or maybe I want it to stay 4:3. So you can decide the framing. And then the next you can do is the exposure, which is that plus minus next to the 4:3 ratio. So I'm just going to tap on the plus minus. Now this is where I can adjust the exposure. So you can see as I go 2.0, it's getting brighter. As I adjust down, it's getting darker. So before I give the answer, I want us all to think. So as I'm going negative 2.0, if we're thinking of aperture, is the little, is it getting smaller or bigger? This is a little bit more intuitive. So that's one way to adjust exposure. So then we could also set a timer. So we could decide, like, we wanted to do some weird, like, light a sparkler over here or something, or maybe we're doing a selfie, which that is when timers become your best friend. Timers will be your favorite thing on the planet. Right now, the timer is off. You can choose preset filters. Now, why in the chat might we decide not to choose these pre-made filters? Why might we not want to do this? And go ahead and type in the chat. Anybody? Yes, you guys are so awesome. So I do not ever use filters. I add filters later. So when you're making a TikTok or a reel, filters are fine because you're recording and it's goes straight on the platform. I still don't think filters are necessary. Sorry, Siri's trying to, Siri, stop.
Okay, I found this on the web for cause you're recording, and it's gonna go straight on the platform.
Okay, sorry about that. Siri and I are constantly battling. So yeah, so you want to take your images with the without any filters, because after we can do a lot of the filters in post-processing. Okay, so that we don't want to use that one. And then we have the option to shoot in camera raw. So I'm going to turn raw mode on. And then, so now it's going to capture more detail in the images when I'm taking the photos. Okay, some other tips when we're taking our photos. So I intentionally have these set up so that there's a distance from here, from the love to the last flower. So right now the love is in focus, but this last flower isn't really focused. So the camera's deciding. So in order for us to take a little bit more control back, how would I focus on that red flower off in the distance? So all you do is tap on the screen with your finger. So you'll see a yellow box pops up. And now I'm focused on the red flower. So that's, or let's say I want to focus on the blue flower. So now it's focusing on the blue flower, or maybe I want to focus on the heart and love. You can see how it's adjusting. And so depending on the use of this image, we may want the love focused, or we might want it a little bit blurry and that red flower in the distance to be in focus. So that's one way that we can control. Now, let's say we have a tripod set up, and I'm going to show you this tomorrow. And we're shooting these, like, let's say we're set up above and we're just taking photos of our stickers. So like, imagine, you see in my drawer of tricks. So let's say we're set up here and we're not going to change the distance, right? Because we're going to set it up. Imagine it's set up on a tripod. So let's say, okay, I'm going to take this picture, and then I'm going to take this picture, and then I'm going to take this picture. And let's say you have to make adjustments every single time. Like, okay, now I need to fix the exposure so that it's brighter. And then I take the photo. Okay, awesome. And then I move this, and then I bring the other one over. And then I have to readjust the exposure. So another option is called AEAF lock mode. So again, we're set up, it's a set distance. My lighting isn't great, I apologize. So I'm gonna focus on the flower. I'm gonna go macro mode, so it's easier to focus. So you can see where, as I'm got closer, trying to pull more detail out of this, using the macro lens, like I can't even get super focused on the flower right now because this lens just isn't able to do it. So shooting in macro mode, look at how many more details I can pull out. So again, let's say I'm going to focus on the yellow bit, and maybe I want it to be exposed a little bit higher. So what I could do is drag my finger up, see the sun rising. So this is just adding more light, or the sun can set. Oops, sorry. Oh, now this is a great demo how it just resets automatically. So I can lower it down. So you can see how if we go way high, how much detail we're losing, as opposed to being the right focus. This is actually pretty true to what the color is. Now let's say we get all these, we're like, okay, let's do this. I'm gonna do this. We got the exposure where we want it. I take the photo. I take it away. The camera automatically readjusts. I put this back. I've got to then readjust that exposure and take the photo. Take it away. And it readjusts. As opposed to using AEAF lock mode, where I'm going to go ahead and hold my finger. You can see AEAF lock came up. I can then increase the exposure, take the photo, move the next one in, take the photo, move the next one in, take the photo. So because I'm using this box, everything that I put in this area is going to be exposed exactly the same, because I'm not moving my camera. I'm not moving anything except the items. So that's how AEAF lock mode can be really beneficial and can help us to be a little bit faster in capturing our images. But if I move my camera at all, you can see that those items become out of focus. If I get too close, it's not focused anymore. So how do we turn AEAF lock mode off? We just tap the screen. So now it's readjusting. So again, this is specifically for the smartphones. If the app lets you use the grid lines, rule if there's line, or is that a setting? That's a setting in my phone. So I can show you where that's at. So if you go into settings and you go, so way down, you go to your camera, and then you can see you right down here in composition, it says grid. You can turn the grid off or turn it on. And I usually have that turned on. I don't know why it's off. And so that's your settings. And this is where you can adjust other settings. Like if you want it to record in stereo sound, if you're doing video, you can make it set to where your camera automatically scans QR codes. Right now, I'm shooting straight at the phone. It's the phone app. I'm not using any special app yet. I had to reverse a little bit so I could show you the basics of what the phone can do, so I can then show you what the apps are capable of. So to get the grid, if I wanted to turn it off, I just turn that slider. Again, this is an iPhone, and I know that other applications have the same, or other phones have the same type of capabilities. So then I want to take us into I'm going to use RAW Plus. I haven't used this one a ton, and the reason I like this app is because I can change my lenses. So I'm right now using a 13mm lens, which makes you can see how like my hand looks really funky. If I go to 26, it changes it. And if I go to 77, and it's having a hard time focusing, it's just a limitation of this camera, and I'm pretty close. So when you have a wider angle lens like the 13mm, so I'm going to just show you from this perspective. So this is the wide, the 26, and then the 77. So these are just different focal lengths of our camera lenses. So I really like this app because you can pick like what type of lens you're using. I'm going to stick with the 26. When I shoot product photography, I usually shoot with a 24-70 lens, which has a focal length of between 24 and 70. So this 26 is right around where I normally shoot. And then you can see on the bottom, it says it says ISO. So I'm just going to show you that if I adjust the ISO to 160, ISO to 200, 250, you can see it's not changing it a ton. But as I get higher, you can see I'm not doing anything else except changing the ISO. So look how bright all these are compared to down here at 160. Here at 160, you're getting like a warmer tone. Maybe it might be a little dark, but so let's say that we want to stay at 160, but we're going to change our shutter speed, which is the next row down. So right now we're at 1/125. So that's 125ths of 1 second. So if I change it to 160, 200, 250, we're just going to go. So I haven't changed the ISO. All I'm doing is changing how fast the shutter is opening and closing. And so you can see the faster the shutter opens and closes at this particular ISO, these items are no longer as focused. But if they were moving, we would stop action. So this is where we find that balance of ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So we're gonna stick with, right? So a general rule for photographing people is anything lower than 1/60, you're gonna get blurry. You're gonna get a blurry image. If you're shooting anything over, I mean, that's the general rule. You can sometimes push it to 1/30, but your subject has to be really still. Otherwise, you're going to get a little bit of blur. So shooting products, though, because they're not doing anything, they're just sitting there. So as long as they're not on a model and they're not on something that's moving and you're using a tripod, because you can see even just me holding my phone, even though in my mind I'm super still, like you can see there's movement happening. So if I go to a really slow shutter speed, look how bright it's getting. So it's that means the shutter is going to be open for a long time. So let's say I want to have a really long shutter speed. I can change the ISO. Oops, wrong way. Even at 150, it's still a 50 ISO. It's still not. So you can, and that's called pushing your camera's capabilities. So you can only push it so far before it's like, sorry, you're not gonna get a good image no matter what you do here. So you can see this is just looking at the focus. Again, I'm just tapping my fingers so I can get the different areas of focus. Okay, hold on 1 second. So right now it's set to auto white balance up at the top. You can change it to fluorescent lights. outside. So this is just the different white balances. But I usually set it to auto, and that just takes an average of everything in the photo so that you're getting a true color. So that makes it really, really nice. And again, this is an application. This is outside of what you might be using on your phone. So I'm going to. Oh, that's the taking picture thing. I'm trying to find. Okay, so that's one app. So just so we can get, I'm gonna shut this off. I'm gonna close it out and I'm gonna go to Raw Camera. This is one I just downloaded. I haven't used it. But one thing that I didn't love about the other app is I couldn't figure out where to adjust the f-stops. So focus, I can again adjust. This is lens position. So I can do it manually, or I can tap on the screen and it'll do it automatically. I can change the ISO. So I can let it do it automatically, or I can do manual, which I just tapped that little button. So now I can change the ISO. I want it to be, I'm going to do a 100 ISO. Maybe. We'll do 102. And then here I can adjust the exposure. These are those f-stops. I'm sorry, this is shutter speed. So how fast and how slow is the shutter gonna go? If I want it to do it automatically, it'll just automatically adjust and I can hit that automatic. I can adjust the white balance. So let's say I want it to have a funky tint or something, or I want it to have a warmer or a cooler temperature. So cooler is those blues, warmer is the orange, or I can just switch it back to auto and it will automatically balance the exposure. Okay. I'm assuming that it's not letting me adjust the f-stop because it lets me do it in the camera, in a regular camera, but oh, I'm in the free version, so it's only giving me examples. I can only be here if I want to take a photo. And the other thing I just noticed, if you're doing photos of 2D work where it's flat, like if you want to make sure that your lens is level and also parallel to your subject, because you can get distortion. So you can see this looks a little bit different shooting at this angle as opposed to when I'm shooting straight up and down and it's parallel. So it will change the look of your 2D work, of your print work. So you want to make sure that this is another reason to have a tripod. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. I just want to do a quick check in. I'll be getting a smartphone to take images on my art products. I'll be trying what you showed. Oh, awesome. Yay. Any other questions? Is this app specifically for iPhones? So if you type in your app store, I'm not sure what that's called for the Google phones, is raw photo. What did I type in? Because honestly, when I'm on my phone, I don't really use a lot of those settings. I only really play with those when I'm on my DSLR. But I think it was raw camera. And I can do a Google search to find out some of those. Oh, you got it. Okay. Because there's like some apps that work on Samsungs and some that only work on an Android or a Samsung. Awesome. And these are just two options. There are tons of options out there. So it's just a matter of finding the one that you like and the one that you are going to actually use. Like I've only used the Raw Plus a couple of times, and I only use it when I'm doing demonstrations. I don't use it for I don't open up the app to take photos when I'm doing anything. So everything is, if I'm gonna make those adjustments, I use my DSLR. But I just wanted you to know that if you don't have a DSLR or a super fancy camera, you can still manipulate and control your images by downloading an app. Again, there's free versions. Most of them you're going to have to pay at some point. The Raw Plus, I'm on like a 7-day free trial, and probably tomorrow after training, I'm just going to cancel because I don't want to. It's like $70 or $60 a year for that app. And so I don't need it. And again, when you're looking at your budget, finding the free options is your best bet. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys tomorrow an app that kind of like you can take the photos on your phone and then transfer it into this desktop or mobile app and get some pretty good results. And I think it's pretty awesome, but I'm a little biased. Affinity Photo, I have not used that one. So I'd be curious, Kim, I'll check that one out as well. Awesome. Okay. So do we have any additional questions about what we've covered so far? Okay. Awesome. If you do, again, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the slide presentation. This is a little bit more, so if you don't have a notebook or and paper or something to take notes on, this is where, it's a little bit more of a interaction, or for yourself. And this is a process that I go through anytime I'm going to do any photo shoot. And I'm going to use my own personal experiences as an example so that y'all can see how this goes through. And I'm curious too if the Affinity is price-wise, how it compares to Photoshop. Because I know right now I'm on a subscription with Adobe and I pay for Photoshop and Lightroom. And I think it's a little over $10 a month. So, okay, I'm definitely going to look into that. Thank you so much for sharing. I love learning about new apps. I am in no way, shape, or form the expert on applications. I tend to learn a thing and then master it, and then I don't have time to learn a new thing. But if it's going to save money, definitely going to check out Affinity. Okay, here we go. All right, so I just want to say that this is my first time presenting through Canva, and I kind of like it. I kind of like it. All right, so the next step is to understand what is the use of the photos. What am I going to use my photos for? And so the first thing is to decide, what am I photographing? One person is photographing glass, and so there are some unique things to think about when you're photographing glass. You probably don't want to go outside where there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that's going to be reflected in the glass. So knowing what we're photographing is going to determine our setup. So that's the first question. Like, if you know in one session, if you have a whole bunch of stickers or patches, and I would do one shoot with just stickers and patches, because then that setup it's gonna save you time, and then you can just streamline things the way I showed you, where you set it up, get the exposure and everything correct, and then and it's on a tripod, and then you're just putting things through without having to like put your phone down or your camera down, then pick it up and readjust, and then you're dealing with framing issues and exposure issues and focus issues. So getting that part of it determined first. Like if I'm going to do a shoot with patches one day, and then I'm going to do a shoot with all my bling stuff another day, if I was going to try to do that, like I'm going to shoot a patch, and I'm going to shoot a bling cup, and I'm going to shoot a patch, and I'm going to shoot a bling pen, like those are two completely different setups. So knowing what you're photographing. So just take a moment, and if you have multiple products that you'll be photographing or multiple subjects, what are some of the considerations as you're going into that session? Like, do you need to consider light or space? Melanie just said I'm photographing clothing. So clothing takes up a lot of room. So are you doing a flat lay? Are you doing a mannequin? Are you using models? What approach are you taking as you're photographing the clothing? If you're shooting, like I do a lot of food photography. And so like here's a couple examples of different setups. And this is like a great example too. These are both images were from my phone. I decided I believe I used portrait mode. I can look more closely and tell you for sure, but I know that berry salad was portrait mode, because I just wanted the focus to be on the berries. I didn't do the food styling, so my plate got set down and I was like, that's really beautiful, and took a photo. And then the other one with the coffee cup and my tea and then my computer, I took a couple of versions of that one where my laptop, my screensaver wasn't on. And then I just liked the way it looked so much better with the screen, the background on, and how the lights and everything in the back sort of created that space. But doing a food photo shoot is going to be a way different setup than doing clothing or doing portraits, like taking pictures of your paintings. So knowing what you're photographing or what you need to photograph. So your job, I just went down a rabbit hole. I got distracted with that salad. Your job is to write down all the different things that you're going to be photographing. Ooh, bath and beauty products and accessories. Those are fun because you can do some really cool staging. I mean, you can do cool staging with everything. And then you're photographing on a mannequin. Mannequins are a great way to save money on hiring a model. Outside around noon on a sunny day. Oh, well, that's the overhead light on the glass, so you're not getting reflection from the side. Awesome. So if you've got pen and paper or you're taking notes somewhere, if you have different like book related items or beaded jewelry, books and beaded jewelry are two different categories. So with beaded jewelry, you might have reflection, and so there's light consideration. With books, depending on the color and what aspect of it you're trying to capture, then those are two different photo shoots. And you could combine them. So there's lots of cool ways to get individual images and then, create social media content. Oh. Yes, well, and so Melanie, the white backgrounds, truly, when you're doing stuff for your website or for your Etsy shop, most of the images, most of what people want to see is what you're selling with the white background. If you have a whole bunch of things going on, like the images I have here, these are social media content. It wouldn't necessarily be something that I would say, oh, I do food photography or buy this mug. I would most likely do like those things with the white background. And that's just knowing the platform that you're using it for, which is the next line item is, where are you going to use the photos? If they're going up on a billboard, those are going to be giant. So you're going to need a professional large file image, as opposed to, oh, these are going on my Etsy shop or my eBay shop. So with that, knowing the stylizing that you're going to have to use for those specific platforms. Correct me if I'm wrong, eBay shops compared to Etsy shops are a little bit different. Melanie shared that on her eBay, she only uses a white background, and because they only want images of the item. Stones are usually white, black, wet and dry, and both sides, yes. And Lynn shared, having a model for at least some photos of my jewelry was the best thing I ever did. And so that we don't really, I haven't talked about this part yet, but having your work, especially if it's wearable art or a functioning piece, having images of that piece in use. Like, people want to see, like, what does that do? How does it look on the body? Sure, it looks great on that mannequin, but what about a real person? Mannequins are the next best thing to a real person. Jewelry is the same thing. Like, you could have a ring and not realize that that ring is like a giant like statement piece, but in the photo it looks like it's tiny and dainty and pretty. And so you want to make sure that people have a good idea of what it looks like on a person. So where are the photos going to be used? Are you making a brochure? Is it going into some sort of a print or publication? Is it going on your website? Is it going to be used in social media? Are you sending it to a juried art show to be selected? What is the purpose? Because whatever the purpose is also going to determine your setup and your approach to your photo session. And then lastly, what is the purpose of the images? So the purpose isn't what it's going to be used for. The purpose of the images is what are you trying to portray in the image. If you're selling on eBay and all they care about is an image of the item itself with the white background and they don't want any creativity, then the purpose of the image is to go on my eBay shop. The purpose of the image is to highlight the detail of my beadwork or my quill work or my sewing skills, or the purpose is to inspire people to, connect with my work. These happen in social media posts on your website, not necessarily for your sales aspect, unless it's an image of your product being used, which studies have shown that when you show a product in use on a model, it increases the sales potential. So what is the purpose of the image? Is it to inspire, to motivate, to get people to buy? So understanding that is also going to determine the setup of your photo shoot. So an example, if I'm doing a branding photo session for a client, I send them, I set up a one-on-one conversation with them. And I ask them, like, what are you hoping to, what are you going to be using these images for? And what is the messaging that you want to portray to the person who's seeing these images? And do you want to be inside? Do you want to be in this inside in the studio? Do you want to be in your space that you create? Or do you want to be outside? Is there like, what is the specific vibe or feel that you're going for? And I also have them create an inspiration board on Pinterest. Like, what stuff do you like? What stuff do you absolutely not like? And if they're struggling with their, like, creating that board, that inspiration board, I will create one based on my interpretation of what they said. And then sometimes it's easier to identify what you don't like than identify what you do like. So I have them do that. So this is a branding shoot for a person. And then I ask them, where are you going to use the photos? Are you going to use these for your website? Are you going to use, or is this going to be printed? Is it going to be for social media? And, you know, most of the time they're like, I need stuff that's going to be like multi-faceted so I can use it in all those places if I need to. And most of my clients they need branding photos for their website updates and their social media platforms. And then I ask them, you know, what's the purpose of the image? Do you want to showcase your work? Do you want to showcase yourself? Do you want to showcase a space? Are you going to use the images and add text? Are you going to just have the images? Will you be removing the background from the images? What, you know, so understanding what the purpose is are these going to be turned into memes? Are they going to be incorporating sales copy? You know, so understanding what the purpose is helps to determine the flow of the photo session. I love light boxes for small works. Absolutely. Oh, I'll be taking pictures of food for social media and a cookbook. That sounds amazing, and I'm jealous. I do have a light box, and I'll show you the one that I use. I use a pop-up light box, and it's just fabric. I use my own external lights, but I know they make versions that have lights incorporated into them already. So the short answer is, I think light boxes are an amazing way to get a nice clean background, especially if you're going to cut the background out and use different colors behind or place your images in a way that the background is removed. Sales copy is just when you go to a website and you read the description of what you're buying, that's your sales copy. Like if let's say I posted my bling water cup, the sales copy would be, it's a 24-ounce glass gemstones scatter pattern. The colors are blue and red and silver and black. It comes with an anti-lip wrinkle straw. You know, so that would be the sales copy, the description. Okay, perfect. All right, so the uses of our photos. So next is, okay, now I know what I'm gonna take photos of, how I'm gonna use them, and what's the message that I want to portray. So first thing is gather. So what you'll need is gather the items that you're photographing. Um, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty busy, and anywhere that I can shave time from work is a bonus, because that means that's extra time that I can spend with my family, or taking naps, or just not working. If we don't find ways to get all the work done that we need done in a normal amount of time, in a healthy amount of time, then we're going to get burnt out, and this is just going to become overwhelming. So the first thing I would suggest for all of you is have all your items that you will be photographing in a specific location. Imagine if you were hiring a photographer to come in and photograph your work for you, and you're paying the photographer per minute, not by hour, but per minute. You would want to, every minute would count at that point, right? So you'd make sure you had every single item that you wanted to photograph prepped and ready to go. So you're not going to show up with something that's all dirty and dusty and needs to be ironed, or needs to be like, there's some finishing touches, because you're paying that photographer for your time, for their time, for you to be doing that work. So imagine that you're going into that photo shoot, even if you're the photographer, every minute counts. So have your items ready and prepped to go for the photo shoot. Because unless you're a professional photographer, this is work. Like, most of y'all create other things besides photos. The photography is just an aspect of your business. It's an aspect of every business owner, unless you like make enough money and you have a line item to hire a social media manager and professional photographers to come in all the time. But most of us aren't there. If you are, again, I'm jealous. But so streamlining this and making it as approachable as possible, so that it doesn't become a daunting task that you dread doing every time you're releasing a new line, or you have a new item to post on your Etsy site, or your eBay site, or your website, wherever the images are going. The next is to determine where you'll be taking the photos. So if you have discovered that high noon outside is the best time to take images of your work to get the best results, then at high noon, you're going to be outside with your work taking photos. If you need to have a special setup, if you need a light box, if you need reflectors, if you need, additional support. So knowing where the photos are going to be taken. Are you going to be in your studio? Are you going to set up a room so that you can just have the space to do the photos? It doesn't have to be a big space. Tomorrow, you guys are going to see how little space, depending on the item. I have to retract that. If you're doing quilts or big giant things, you're going to need a lot more space, and take that into consideration as well. I've seen some quilt workers that they'll hang their quilts out on kind of like a clothesline outside, so they have more space to capture those big works, because most of the time inside isn't going to capture it as nicely as you can get it outside. So understanding where you're going to be taking the photos, which then will speak to the equipment that you're going to need in order to effectively work in the space that you're taking the photos. So your camera, what camera are you using? A tripod. I cannot tell you enough how valuable having a tripod is going to be. Doesn't have to be an expensive, super fancy one. You can find them on Amazon. for under 20 or 30 bucks, depending on what you're getting. Are you going to need a table to set your items on? Or any backdrops? Do you need like special colors or just a white backdrop? And also just to bring backdrops into the equation, a common mistake for creators, especially for bead workers or any work that has patterns, is we put pattern on pattern, as like have a pattern as the backdrop, and that oftentimes loses the impact of the actual item. So I personally always recommend having a very neutral colored background, because then you can use apps like what I'm going to show you tomorrow to remove the background, and you can change the background to whatever color you want it to be. So having backdrops be black, depending on your work, or white, or it's called fashion gray, and a lot of photographers use fashion gray because it's really easy to change the color of the background, and it doesn't reflect anything back into the color of the item or the models and the clothes. Light filters, depending on the work that you're photographing, you may need to have a light filter, and a light filter can be something as simple as a white sheet, a piece of parchment paper, white tissue paper, anything, or a window, anything that's going to filter intense light, especially if intense light isn't going to serve your work. An example I can use is in this slide, you can see the studio setup with the black backdrop, and there's all those lights. And let's say you wanted a pure black. You can see from this image that they're not getting, so right in here, this hair light, or that light that's used to light up the backdrop, is creating a hot spot. So sometimes we need to, and let's say that's not a desired effect. And now, if this is a portrait, most likely that is a desired effect, because it's going to highlight the person's hair and it's going to just be beautiful. But if you're doing this with a product and you've got what are called hot spots, this is where detail is lost in the image. You can prevent that by adding a filter or making the light source go farther away. Again, we're going to get more into lighting tomorrow, but I just wanted to point that out since we're on this slide. The other is reflectors. Sometimes we need to reflect light into an item. And an example of that, if you look at the product photographs, it looks like it's shampoos and different things there. You know, maybe they are reflecting light off of a reflector into the item, which lights it up. And again, I'm going to demonstrate a lot of that for us tomorrow. And then also, are you going to need any models? Are you going to need additional props? Sometimes if we're like, especially if we're doing food photography, we'd want to look at like, what types of plates are we using? What kind of cutlery? Any like tablecloths, any other table accessories that are going to accentuate and highlight the item that we're photographing. We never want to use props that are going to take away from the focal point of the item that we're photographing. Everyone should be able to look at your photo of your product and know those are shoes. That's what they're highlighting. Those are earrings that they're highlighting. I don't know. I've run into this quite a few times where I'm looking at a model wearing something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that skirt is adorable. I love that skirt. And then I go to the site to purchase the skirt or get more details about the skirt, but they're actually selling earrings. And so the focal point of that image was obviously not the earrings, it was the skirt. So you don't want your customers to, or the people viewing your products to go, oh, they're selling chopsticks. when in fact, what you're selling are the recipes for the food. So you want to make sure that you're highlighting the correct aspects in your images, and the props don't take away from the focus, which is your product. So what are the filters, light filters in the equipment list, and what are the reflectors? Are they easily accessible and affordable to someone outside of the photography profession? Yes. So I don't have, I'll make sure and bring it tomorrow in my setup. I'm gonna share some videos with Lynn. I'll see if I can find them before the end of our time together, and I'll post them in the chat so that you can have them. There, I have 2 YouTube videos. One is a live shoot, which I might not share that one, but I do want you to see how I utilize the equipment. And one is how to make your own light filters and reflectors and your own light box out of things you have at home. Because I totally agree, Ruby, like why go out and buy all this expensive stuff if you're not a professional photographer? Unless you're going to be doing a lot of work and it's going to pay for itself in the long run. I even though I have a lot of equipment, like I have that full studio setup that you see, almost everything in that image, but I rarely use it. I use my ring lights. I have a construction light that I got at Home Depot for, I think it was $10. And the light temperature is really neutral, so it doesn't cast a yellow color or a blue color. It's a nice pure white light. So I use that, and it's only like, I don't know, 6 by 6. And I'll use scarves. I'll use white. I've been known to use a white paper towel as a light filter. But in the video, it shows you how to use cardboard box and tissue paper to create a light box for yourself. So there's absolutely affordable ways to make this happen. Okay. Great questions. Thank you guys so much for asking questions. It helps me to make sure that I'm getting you the information that you need. Okay. So that brings us to the end here. My name is, again, Roxanne Best. You can find me in all of these places, my website. If you have questions, you can email me or you can email Lynn. Lynn, I'm not sure if I got your email address right. I was being lazy and I didn't look. I was trying to go off of memory.
Well, I'll just type it in here again.
Okay, thank you. So I wasn't being lazy. I just put my stuff and I was like, oh, wait, I need to add Lynn in here. So that's there. So and we're not in the social media training, but my @RoxanneBest is my Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So, and I also have a website that's roxannebest.com. It goes to the same website as ourbest.life. So you can type my name in and you'll find me anywhere, which I highly recommend that you try to stay consistent through all your platforms like that as well, whether it's using your name or your business name. So thank you so much for being here. After this, I'm going to open up to any additional questions. I'm going to show you my tripod that I've got sitting next to me. And if I can find my other ones close by, I'll show you that. So tomorrow we're going to go over, any questions that may have percolated over the night, because oftentimes in the moment we can't think of the questions, but we'll start out with a review and any questions that you might have. I'm going to I'm going to set up a mini photo shoot so you can see what that looks like. And then I'm going to edit those images using smartphone apps. So I know many of you might use Photoshop and then I need to write that other app down so I don't forget it. Or whatever you use on your computer, but I really want to show you how to do this, just using your phone. So I'm going to show you some different apps. And then also other apps that you can use for removing the background from your images. A quick Canva demo, because Canva is like a one-stop shop. And then anyone tonight that takes images or has images already, if you want to share those with me or have them available tomorrow to share in the chat, and you want like a live review of those images, like what you could improve and how maybe they're amazing and we just want to say how great they are. And then we'll open it up again to some more question and answer time at the end. Okay, and I'm going to close it down. Oh, bugger, I didn't mean to close it all the way. Okay. All right, any questions? Mention staying consistent with names throughout social platforms. My birth name versus my business name on my platforms when marketing my products. So I ran into the same thing, and not to go too far down the social media rabbit hole, but yeah, most people, I really wanted people to know me by my business name. And I was really trying to push that. But the way that everybody was searching for me was my name, was Roxanne Best. And so I made a conscious decision to switch from my business name to my personal name. If you talk to my business coach that I'm working with right now, they'll tell you that you need to separate yourself from your business. So maybe just using your business name will be the best approach. Because he's like, you need to take your CEO hat off and be Roxanne, and then you need to stop being Roxanne and be the CEO of your business. So, but most people know me by my name, so I decided to use my name. Marilyn, that's great. I mean, that's a great example of how it doesn't have to be super expensive and complicated. Awesome. Are there any additional questions? Did I miss any? Tomorrow will be recorded. I'm not sure how those are shared.
Yes, they are being recorded, and everybody that registered is going to get a link.
It was a lot of info. And I even pared it down from what I presented before. But because it is recorded, I'm hoping that you can take it and review it and absorb that the whole just like the simple takeaway is there are ways that I can capture images of my work without having to go and spend a bunch of money on equipment. And, by understanding some of the foundational principles of photography, then we're able to manipulate what we have to get the best results without feeling like we have to, get out a small business loan in order to just do a simple task of taking photos of the work that we're creating. Awesome. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I will see you all tomorrow at 12 Pacific time. Because I think we're all over in quite a few places, so I want to make sure. I'm going to need help making my clothing colors look the same in person and in photos. It makes absolute sense, Melanie. And there are some tips that you can incorporate in your photos, that will make it a lot easier to do that. And I'll just say, get a gray card, period. Because if you get a gray card and it's somewhere like on the outside of your image, and when you go to edit, you just hit that gray card for your white balance, and everything will adjust to true colors. And there's other things I can show you as well that I've used in the past. But they're a lot more complicated, and it's like you put a color grid in your photo shoot, and then it helps you get true colors. Awesome. Business cards. Cynthia, I see. What about business cards? I was thinking about them. Is that you're still here, can you clarify that just a little bit? Business cards are great. There's some new electronic style business cards that will save you money and be able to share so much more with your clients. And I'm actually waiting for my current batch of business cards to run out. So my next investment is going to be in those types of business cards, where I just have one card, and like let's say someone's like, let me have your business card, and they can just like tap it like that, and it'll all pop up on their phone. So nice. And if you have booths and you're doing art markets or things like that, you can have it set on your table. Like if you want to follow me on Instagram, or follow me on or sign up for my newsletter, you can just have a little sign that says tap here with your phone, and they can just tap their phone and all the stuff will pop up. It's really cool. And you can even have your pay accounts linked, like PayPal, or I think they do Square. And you like your Venmo, those types of apps as well. Creating one with my own art. I love that idea. That I just met an artist. Actually, I know an artist. He creates his business cards, and he has like his artwork on the business cards. And I will look and see if Vistaprint does this, but I know moo.com. Type it. Moo.com, you can go and order their business cards, and they have, it's called the Moo size, or they have like different sizes. Like you can get them like this size, and each card, you can have up to 25 different images. So on one side is my stuff, and on the other side is my logo. And if I wanted, which my next batch of cards like these, I'm going to have like inspirational quotes or something like that. But that would be a great way to showcase your work. And I know Vistaprint allows custom uploads, but I don't know if they allow you to have multiple backgrounds or backside images in one order, or if you have to order a different backside for each image that you're creating. So I know that Moo, you can have up to 25 different images on the background, and you have the same, like your contact information, and on the other side is each different image. So it's moo.com. Just like the cow. Moo. And they have really nice papers too for your cards. I mean, the pricing isn't in line with Vistaprint. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you want that customization, I would look at Vistaprint and see if you can do multiples of different images, unless you just have one image that is like your signature style and you want that to be on your card. Then Vistaprint would be definitely okay, awesome, Paul. Yes, Vistaprint does allow multiple uploads, so. Awesome. Any other questions? These are great questions. All right, if not, then we are finished for the day. And I just want to ask everybody to send positive energy and prayers to our friends in Hawaii as they're dealing with some pretty intense fires. So send them some good vibes and some good energy. Yeah, Marilyn, I love that idea. All right. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, and we will see you all back here tomorrow.